So you're saying Chovy is the best player in the world and has destroyed Faker's career.
There's definitely going to be a lot of good takeaways that, you know, will make the LEC Summer Split even more unwinnable for all other EU teams.
Broxah, you can say it.
No, I'm a good boy. I don't do that.
Hello everyone and welcome to the jungle. I'm Ginny, joined with Cubby and Broxah, and we're going to be talking about the EPIC MSI finals that has just passed, and we're going to be looking up at everything ahead on the summer when it comes to the LEC and the LCS. But first of all, let's talk about G2. Let's talk about G2 at MSI, because I was a doubter. I was a non-believer. I was a tweeter and deleter, and I was like, yeah, no, they're not going to make it. They're not going to do anything. But G2 has genuinely done so well at MSI, and they can hold their heads high. I, as an LEC fan, am very proud of them. But Broxah, you, as an LEC fan, former player, current analyst, what are you thinking?
I think it's a really tricky one, you know, talking about G2 and whether you're satisfied or not, right? Because I feel like there's a limit to how satisfied you can be knowing that they dropped out, getting 3-0'd by T1. But at the same time, they also showed some really positive things and some good sides. Mm-hmm. I think the series against Top Esports was really, really great. I mean, in terms of drafting, they were one step ahead, and I think TES were clearly expecting standard drafts, but they just had no answers to G2's Ivan, so their Kog'Maw and Braum. And then there were just beautiful games where it felt like each member of G2 was like stomping. Like game 1, it was Spot Gap, with a little bit of spice from mid lane and Caps. Game 3 was Top Gap. But Yike was really consistent every single game. Like, everybody had their highlight moment, and they just outclassed in all 5 roles over the series. And every time that somebody had a quieter game, it's like they were not even playing back or playing bad. They just took a step back and kind of lost lane gracefully, getting carried. T1 series obviously a little more tricky, but even for that, I don't know. Like, I mean, how do you feel about it, Cubby? What do you think?
I mean, I think that the biggest thing that you can give the G2 is this feels like an era of League of Legends where like we're coming into tournaments like, all right, there are the Eastern teams and then the Western teams, right? And the odds of taking down the Eastern teams only get to be held by one or none in terms of Western teams. I think the big energy upset was over G2 to get into the quarterfinal stage last Worlds. And that was like the big upset that ended up, you know, getting you to that stage of the tournament. They didn't go through any Eastern teams. Like, I don't think an Eastern team dropped to a Western team in that tournament. And we're coming into this one like off the heels of that. And I always find that in spring there are more roster changes. So I know that wasn't really the case for G2, but you know, sometimes the levels of teams are just a little bit different, and I think it's harder to take games off the Eastern teams, your Western team, at least at MSI, compared to Summer, in my opinion, just like from what I've seen. And G2 not only were able to successfully do that, but also had people predicting them to beat T1, who were not in their top form, but it's still T1. I think that the fact that G2 got fans to have faith in them and faith that this is a competitive tournament and G2 can go to finals and can at least be competitive for the entirety of it. Like, that's the biggest win that you can take away is G2. They're really fighting an uphill battle, and the fact that they were able to show up and have that level of performance where they were going up against the best teams, even the 0-3 against T1, like, they played respectably. There was no shame in the way they went out. So I think that for G2, like, they should be really happy with where they're at, and it keeps on, for me, begging the question, who else is going to step up and fight them in the region? Because they looked so much stronger than Fnatic in this tournament. And it really is just kind of like, who can push G2? Because that's really the era that made Europe great that you were a part of, Broxah. The fact that we had multiple teams pushing each other at the top.
Back in the day.
Back in my young days. No, but I think you're right. Somebody has to step up, and it's been so obvious, like, I mean, all of this year, so far at least, that G2 has had some games within the LEC where they took too big risks and where things went downhill, but ultimately they're just so much better, so much more consistent than literally everybody else. And who went into MSI second place? For the most part of it, looked like a bit of a coin flip, which isn't entirely convincing, right? I also think when it comes to the T1 series in particular, what gives me faith is that there wasn't any individual player on G2 that got destroyed. Like they just simply were outperformed as a team, and an area like team fighting, for example, is where it often went wrong. Like when you have to set up down and you just need to fight in the right way, but the pieces are not really being put together perfectly, and C1 outsmarts you. But I think that generally, like, the macro is there, the hands are there, they're having the right mindset. It's just about continuing to perfect it. And of course, like, if there's no other good team in Europe, it's going to take a lot longer to do that, because you can only catch up so much in these boot camps going into international tournaments. But I definitely have faith in them. I also want to point out that, like, Caps has been great this entire tournament. I think, like, even in the series, despite them getting 3-0'd, he was really consistent. I would even go as far as saying he actually outperformed Faker overall, which is crazy to even say. I mean, it's Faker, right? But one thing that I think is sad, like, one thing I was really missing was they've been so good at drafting the entire year, both in LEC but also at Worlds, and like I said, MSI, sorry. And like I said earlier, in the top esports series, that's one of the things that gave them a huge advantage. Like, they had no response to any of the craziness G2 brought to the table, but some of the stuff we saw from them versus T1 was a Kha'Zix blind pick for Yike in the first game. There was less Prio and Ivan. We randomly started prioritizing Draven like crazy, and they didn't really look for Kog'Maw and Braum. And sure, I mean, Kha'Zix blind is a risk that you can take. It's not necessarily a good one, because what is a Kha'Zix going to bring to the table in these team fights, which is one of the areas we're lacking? Or why are we looking at Draven? Like, do we expect Hans to just slam Gumayusi in lane? I don't think so. I think they got to go back to the drawing board a little bit, but there's definitely going to be a lot of good takeaways that, you know, will make the LEC Summer Split even more unwinnable for all other EU teams.
Yeah, I think honestly, so there was a lot of praise going over to G2 and their staff. I think that's well deserved. But I think one area that they aren't getting enough praise, and I don't see enough praise, is actually Yike. Like, the cop blind is kind of weird, but for me, Yike was, when I was looking at this team going international the last couple times, I was like, okay, Yike's the liability. And the reason that it was Yike is because when he was being incorporated in the G2, it was, okay, we're going to play Yike style. Like, the entire game, we're going to do the craziest stuff level 1 to make sure that Yike gets a good game. And, like, props to Yike. I mean, he was a good enough player where if he was able to get good starts, he could carry games with Caps. For me, Yike felt so much more malleable in this tournament and so far from being a liability. Like, who would have thought when Yike first came on the scene that the biggest pick for G2 in this tournament would be Ivern? Like, of all champs, like, that was not a Yike pick. He was the guy playing Bel'Veth and splitting maps level 1 and, like, nuking you whenever he could beat you to the punch. So I think the fact that G2, like, again, I mean, we had discussions on this podcast too. We felt like Razork was overperforming Yike, that he wasn't getting enough credit in his LEC performance. And I think Razork had an okay tournament. I don't want to take anything against him, but I thought Yike really showed up for this tournament. And even in the games where they dropped, I thought Yike was still fine. And I think that's, for me, honestly, the biggest thing that G2 can take with them for summer as well. I really feel like Yike played well. I know BB got a lot of credit, and I like that's very much deserved, but I don't see a lot for Yike. And for me, he was one of the big difference makers in this team for this tournament.
I think you could really give so much credit to anybody, right? Like, everybody expected Caps to show up. I don't want to say it's a given that he played as well as he did, but we had high expectations. Bot lane has been struggling, but managed to step up massively. Hans was literally slamming Jakilov with a bit of assistance from Mickey, so that was beautiful to see. Mickey has been one of the greatest supports this tournament overall, I think. Broken Blade has been great. And then, like you mentioned, I think one thing that G2 was really lacking last year is that it seemed like they relied heavily on their individual performances. It's just, and just, playing aggressive, snowballing, which often would put Yike in a position where he was the carry. But this year they focused on going back to more traditional League with him playing more supportive role, and I think them having evolved, bringing different playstyles has made a big difference, but also just actually being a really, really good team from like a point of how do we set up for these objectives, how do we play the macro game, how do we rotate, how do we use our advantages, because that's not something they've been as great at before. They would just have individual players so good that it didn't matter. But now, like, once you have that great foundation, I think you can really, really build on something great, and hopefully we're going to see that at Worlds.
You're talking particularly, we're talking about like individual players, and everyone has done their part and has really stepped up. I mean, we could talk about Mickey and the Poppy. We can talk about Hamsama and the Draven in different series. We can talk about every single one, BB and the Zac, like Caps overperforming Faker. And I think that was a big talking point as well last podcast that we had. But in general on social media, when we were looking at, Caps is in really good form, Faker and T1, not necessarily so. It felt like this was one of those tournaments that could have potentially been those one in a lifetime chances where you're catching T1 off on a not so good performance. And I don't really know exactly what to pinpoint it down to when it comes to T1, because I mean, we can talk about the draft picks in terms of T1 being on their red side, and then you're taking away Faker's picks, and then what do you prioritize? Where do you go? But beyond that, it felt like T1 at a lot of their matches just didn't necessarily hit the mark. And to me, that brings the question, what was going on there as well?
I hate to be the one to speculate, but Faker, like...
You're going to do it anyway.
I mean, Faker wasn't himself this tournament. And I know there was a clip that was actually like after the G2 series of Faker kind of shaking his wrist backstage or like really trying to stretch. I mean, I think at this point, like, T1's schedule was so insanely aggressive throughout the year. They're being asked to play show matches outside of the initial Riot schedule. They're making it to the end of every single event. And like, I don't know, I think Faker, like, I would not be mad if I saw T1 say, hey, this guy's going to take the first couple weeks off of summer, or he's going to take it easy, or Faker's form, we just are going to accept for the first few weeks that it's not going to be as good because he's going to be playing less games. I think that one of the coolest parts about the T1 run last year was the fact that Faker was coming off an injury, and this team looked like a shell of themselves without him. Which, I mean, I still think is crazy, because like that team is so crazy talented from top to bottom that they could look so lost without Faker just in the team was like almost frustrating, just given how elite those guys are.
Definitely frustrating.
Yeah, it was really frustrating. And I'm okay if T1 looks like that again, if it means that Faker's healthy and ready to go for Worlds. But it was so weird because Faker really was coming off of one of his domestic splits, like best domestic splits I've seen of him of late. This guy was the one mid laner who was like actually going up against Chovy and able to challenge him, not on the individual level, but the fact that, you know, he was going close to even in lane, he was playing out the matchups correctly, and then he was able to impact map. Like, they were playing so well as a team. T1 always plays very aggressively. Faker was the one following up, making good calls, making good engages, and then we get to MSI, and like he's getting pounded in some of these lanes. It's like his champion pool was focused, but then he wasn't able to show up. Yeah, of course, respectfully, it is still the GOAT. It's going to be inducted in the Hall of Legends later this week. But yeah, I mean, I think that the issue with T1 was really Faker wasn't the Faker that he needs to be if T1's going to win a tournament. And that feels like very appropriate, I feel like, looking back in the VODs. This wasn't a Guma carry. Also, Zeus got kind of smashed later on by Bin, but that's fine. Bin's very good. Like,
would you say, though, like
Faker's one underperforming?
Would you say, when you're looking, because you're talking about the T1 schedule and you're saying like how insane it is in terms of show matches, in terms of the LCK, then you also make it deep into internationals. Would you say that this potentially would be the best time and place for that quote unquote wake up call to say, okay, this is actually maybe a little too much for only one player who's already had an injury? We can now take it slower and focus more on Worlds?
I think it's a tricky one, right? Also because, I mean, even for me, especially last year on Fnatic, like I could really feel that the commitments you have as a player like increases a lot when you play for a big team, and all of a sudden it's not all about playing your game, but you know, you have certain commitments to content and sponsors, streaming applications. Maybe you have like YouTube channel, just random things that you're expected to do all the time that takes focus away from playing the game. And that was just me. Like Faker is, you know, 100 times crazier than that. And I think that's always going to be one of the big challenges of being in that position, right? Not just for Faker himself, but especially also for T1, finding out like how do you manage this, and how do you create a scenario where, you know, the greatest player of all time in our video game can continue to look like one of the best mid laners in the world, but still help us, you know, continue to pump a lot of money into the industry and help it grow and whatnot. And I think it's hard. Like, they probably should be giving the guy a break, one way or the other, because I can't even imagine how crazy his life has looked like for the past 10 years, or especially the last couple of years after grinding so hard. Like, I remember, I think it was Worlds 2018, I want to say, with Fnatic. We heard that all the Korean teams scrimmed 3 blocks every day, and in Europe as well as in North America, like all the Western teams only did 2. So if I remember correctly, we would like meet at 12. We would have a meeting and talk about prep and all for like an hour. 1 to 4, we would play 3 games. Then we would have a short break. We would play another 3 games, and then we would play solo queue for a while and eventually go to bed or whatever. But the Korean teams, they didn't stop after those 6 games. They played another block in the evening, which I think was from 11 p.m. until 1 a.m. And then we also heard that they were expected to play solo queue up until, I don't know, 4 or 5 a.m., like something crazy. And our coaches were like, we don't expect you to stay up and play solo queue all night, but we want to try to do this triple block just once. I don't remember which team we played against, but I remember they were said very specifically, T1 does this, so you guys need to do this as well. And we did it once, and we never did it again, because all of us were half asleep in the fast block, and we just couldn't play anymore. And like, we all just sat there discussing, like, how do they even do this? Like, how could they function after so many games? But it's like, you know, they almost have turned into robots, and it's really impressive, but still, they're humans. You got to give them a break once in a while.
So one of the big things with T1 is, like, historically it's been this way forever. They really ramp up their solo queue in the second round robin of every split. Like, they play still a ton in the first round robin, but then second round robin is when they start really busting out the late nights. So I do think that Faker will get a reprieve, hopefully, or reprieve. Like, he earns it. If any player is like going to be able to take a break, it's him. But I honestly think that for T1, I mean, this is the biggest concern of them. Wondering if they almost start giving him the Uzi treatment, right? Where it's like, hey, if your wrists aren't well, we're going to do what we can. I think it'd be fascinating if there was a player-owned system that existed in the ecosystem. If they did want to give Faker a break, like, okay, who's going to go join T1? Like, who will T1 go buy out and like have join for a couple weeks, right? Mm-hmm. And I will say that, like,
Caps.
Bring in Caps, guys. It's going to be fine.
Get some experience and bring it back to EU.
We're going to take the mid laner that has the best record against Faker out of the equation.
Genius.
Yeah, but no, I actually think it's going to be really interesting to see what T1 ends up doing, because, again, like, I'm speculating, but Faker wasn't himself, and this is an issue that he's dealt with recently. And I think that the biggest priority for T1 is that if this guy's going to continue to play and compete, he needs to be at the highest level when it matters. And Faker's always done that when it comes to international tournaments. Like, this is the first international tournament I can remember in a while where it wasn't like, oh, domestically Faker's kind of, you know, not playing great, but internationally, oh boy, guys, Faker's in great form for this tournament. We're in luck. Like, it was flipped. I can't remember the last time it was flipped. I really can't. And hey, maybe that speaks to how good gen.g is. You know, who knows? But
Well,
yeah,
you also need to, you know, remember that it's not like they got stomped, right? Like, they had some really close matches with a lot of teams, and they did take BLG to game 5. BLG also struggled pretty heavily against gen.g. Like, they 3-1'd them twice. So gen.g just seems to be on a whole other level. But yeah, of course, like, we're always gonna be expecting more from T1, especially after seeing their final in the LCK that also went to 5 games and was so close. But yeah, I don't know. I guess the gap between the two widened a little bit in the meantime.
It brings a question then as well in terms of like what happened. Like, first of all, you have this gap widening. Is that the expectations? Because you're absolutely right. When someone is like, oh, there's an international competition. Oh, T1 is playing. Oh, Faker. And immediately your brain is like, well, this team is going to be in the finals, or this team might actually win it. Or even if you're not even a hardcore League of Legends fan, you're just the average Andy that watches like maybe one game a year on the LEC or LCS and goes like, ha, the West sucks. And sorry, I almost said I can't remember if we can curse on here. I'm trying to keep it PG. It's like, oh, the West sucks. And then you're like, oh, international. Oh, yeah, T1's going to be in the final. And I think in that extent, we hold them to such high regard. And Faker particularly has been held to such high regard, where it's like when there is the smallest, tiniest little amount of slip up, it's immediately noticed. And is that potentially also something that eventually gets to a person or a player? Because at the end of the day, we are in an industry where if you're like 10 years in this industry, you're literally considered a fossil. And that brings a whole different ball game on top of the pressure that some of these players already have.
I mean, he's such a fossil that he's going to be immortalized in the client forever with the Hall of Legends. It's
well deserved. Like, yeah, that's the bare minimum.
It's how much of a fossil Faker is, guys.
And I think it's...
In a good way. Please just say that you mean it in a good way before people like in the comments are like, get this guy out of here. I want to replace them. No, also I'm
trying to make the shorts, you know? I just need to throw the bait out there out of context and then
out of context, you want to get clipped out of context. That's like when Medic would say MILF hunters. Like, that was a funny out of context. That was maybe that's why he's not here today. He got fired for saying MILF hunters.
Goodbye, Medic.
Bye. You'll be missed.
No, but like, on a serious note for Faker, I think if Cubby didn't exist, people wouldn't be having the same discussions about whether Faker is, you know, washed or whatever. Because if you compare him to Knight or Cream or Caps or whatever, it's not like he's getting dunked on in the same way. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think, you know, again, looking at our expectations for him, we want more, but I think Cubby is just on a whole other level. Like, I don't know.
So are you saying
arguably the best player in the world? I would say he probably is just straight up the best player in the world right now. So it's tough competition out there. What were you saying, Ginny?
So you're saying Chovy is the best player in the world and has destroyed Faker's career?
Now that's how you get clipped out of context.
That's clickbait!
That's how you do it.
That's really... Yeah, let's just say that. Sure, why not? That's
no. You have to argue against the point. You have to say, like, of course, like, there's no debate in this. No,
there's no arguing. He's the best in the world. There really isn't.
No, there is no arguing at all. Absolutely,
he is the best in the world. Like, this guy is just a monster, and I think Faker definitely is gonna have it in him to, you know, like, imagine being him. Imagine being in his situation, and now this guy that you fought against like a billion times, now finally after all this fighting has pushed you off the pedestal and is considered better than you. Like, that must really fuel something within him. Like, I'm sure he's gonna come in real hot for Summer and Worlds, and their battles are gonna be even more legendary. But for now, like, if you want to create the best team in the world, like, you take Chovy over Faker any day of the week based off what we've seen recently.
I think it's a race for second. And I would give second to Bin. I think that's actually an interesting conversation. I think Bin is, like, actually crazy, just on another level good, which is quite fun. But, like, returning to the Faker conversation. Yeah, I mean, Chovy, there's an old phrase that's thrown around in old StarCraft 2 and was thrown around a little bit at Faker at the start of his career. And it's like, it's known as Bonjwa. It's like when you were the kaiju boss, you know, you were the big guy. And Chovy, like, it's been a long time since we've had a Bonjwa and LCK. Chovy is him right now. The only thing I'll kind of push back about with this conversation is, I think ever since Showmaker and Chovy came onto the scene, it's been there are top 3 mid laners with Faker, and those two at times have really outshone Faker in the laning phase. But Faker was always so good at fighting and so good at playing the map that he always found ways to be effective as like a player and on his team. And I think that's the scariest part about Chovy, is that he has every lick of the talented individual that he is, especially in the laning phase. But he is now so good at playing the map and so good at playing with his team that this guy is just, he comes in with all the econ in the world that you can possibly amass into every fight. And when you are that good and playing on that level, like watching him play these Tank Azir games back in LCK was just like, it was an absolute cheat code. Like this guy absolutely just 1v9 a series. And it's really crazy, like how his skill set has evolved over time and the player that he is now because of that. Because I have not seen someone this dominant in the game in a long time. Like this is a game where for me, it's gotten more and more like, how do you play as a team? Are you dominant as pairs or duos or like 3v3s, right? And now it's just like Gen.g plays map ridiculously well. They have a lot of talented players, but Chovy's the guy who is gapping everyone. And I have not seen something like that in a long time at the level that Chovy's doing it.
It's actually really interesting that you bring that up, because a lot throughout interviews with players and teams, especially when the teams and the plays are towards the top, it's always like, okay, well, we are doing really well, and we have been doing really well for a long time. But of course, people can see what we do. And as a result, players can catch up. So we have to then figure out what they're going to do to catch up. And as a result, try and innovate. And then we're always trying to be one step ahead. But at the same time, the other teams it's easier for them to catch up because of how much there is available already on us, tape or VODs or whatever you want to say. So I guess it's just a matter of time where now Chovy has actually caught up, that's the right word, to Faker, if you would say so. And then now it's a matter of Faker trying to find something to put himself ahead again. But then the second he does that, whether that's a new pick or a different style or something else with the macro, that's going to be out there. And then Chovy can pick that up as well. And it's like, it's just this, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? And it's a constant chase of who's going to do what.
I think every time Faker plays well, he further cements his legacy, and it makes Chovy have to perform at this level for longer to reach Faker. So I don't know like how much Faker has to do to topple him at this point, because I don't know if Faker individually can topple him anymore. I don't. Faker can match him, maybe. And if he does that, that's a crazy accomplishment given the level that Chovy's at. But every year Faker keeps on playing as well as he does, he just further cements that like he is the GOAT. He's never going to be toppled. Like, he's been playing at this level for 11 years. That's ballistic to think about.
I also think it's interesting how fast things can change, because around this time last year, like if we looked at best player in the world, a lot of people would say Ruler, because he was like invincible as an AD carry. Like nobody could stop him, nobody could lane against him. Well, he's not even at the tournament now.
It was him or Kanavi. Like that was the point.
Yeah, things change really quickly, and maybe in just a couple of months from now, Faker has smashed Chovy in the series. Like, you never know what's going to happen. But I think what's so interesting about him now is that Faker's viewed as this like absolute mastermind. Was so good at reading what the enemy team is going to do, and playing team fights, while Chovy has always been the god laner who gets these huge advantages and who always needs to translate them. And sure, like both of them are good in every aspect, but I think them having these differences in their play style also makes it really interesting, because then it also comes down to how much can one learn from the other in order to again evolve their play and reach the whole other level.
Yeah, we're talking about differences in playstyle. Actually, I want to particularly come back to you, Cubby, because you mentioned that it was like a race for second, and potentially Ben being in there because you think Ben is a phenomenal player. And then that brings us to the MSI final, because Ben, BLG, Chovy on Gen.g, and it was a 3-1. And I think to an extent for a lot of people, including myself, it was maybe a little bit anticlimactic, because I genuinely thought this was going to be like a 5 series game where they're pushing each other to the limit. It was
close, almost.
Well, it was close.
Yeah, it was, but then it wasn't, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I want to have this discussion in terms of the MSI finals, but also more so around Bin as an individual and what is it about Bin and his phenomenal performance nonetheless, both in the LPL and also on the international stage that makes you go, well, it's a race for second, and I would actually put Bin in there.
I'm almost with you with like it being anticlimactic because game 4 was such a banger that it's like, oh man, gen.g won, right? On like some really weird backdoor attempts from BLG. Yeah. But I think what makes Bin crazy is he's actually so good. Like, yes, he like mechanically he's really talented, right? Like his Jax, his Camille, his Cassante, he's all individually really skilled on these champions, but it's how he uses them and how much space that he creates for Elk. And I actually felt like BLG's bot lane, like for me, didn't perform up to the standard that I had them at going into this tournament. Because I saw what Bin was doing, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy's doing everything in his power to just like absolutely blitz any team fight. His Camille was a terror, which is no surprise given how much Camille that he's played in solo queue in his career. His Cassante was, I mean, all the elite Cassantes at this tournament were doing a lot of Cassante things, but he was one of them, right? I feel like him on fighters, the angles that he picks to go in, and like where he's taking these engages on the map, and the amount of space it creates for the rest of his team, that's where I really feel like Bin's on another level.
I think like he's such an interesting player because I still remember the first year of his career, 2020, he played for Suning. Yep. I mean, he made it to the world final that year, which is one thing, but I've talked to a lot of top laners back then who played against him either on stage or in scrims, and every single one of them were traumatized from having to lane versus Bin because nobody could lane against him. Like, he was just that good. Like, you make one silly misstep at any point, or you hit one minion when you shouldn't have, and your game is over. Like, he would just end you on the spot. And I think he's really been able to push everybody and really, you know, take the top lane to a new level, a new dimension. And obviously, just like everybody else, he's gonna have games that goes well and that doesn't go so well. I think he's always been known for being really aggressive too, so sometimes that can go south. But it's just having these players that are so good at playing in the edge. It's a bit like how you know, amazing Uzi was when he was peaking, where nobody could lane against him. Like, you make one mistake and the game is over. Like, that's how most top laners that I've played against Bin has always felt. Like, he's just that good.
I want to bring that back then to the MSI final particularly. It doesn't necessarily like have to be anything from Bin or anything from a particular player, but rather the most memorable moments about it. I think for me, for the MSI final, if I'm being completely honest, I was like, oh, it's going to be like, it's going to be in China. It's going to be a Chinese home crowd, and there's a Chinese team. And I expected the fireworks and the whole lot. And I thought it was going to be like this really big, blown out of the water opening ceremony. And I'm very understanding in terms of like, obviously I work in talent side of things, and I know that there is always going to be a budget that will be the biggest, if not the only decider in terms of like limitations. But I think that also for me to like a little bit of a certain extent fed into the anticlimactic part of it.
I think it definitely is a shame that the opening ceremony wasn't crazier. Like, some of the most memorable moments I have from my career is, well, opening ceremonies either for Worlds, MSI, or for the LEC, right? Like, you can really create something extraordinary and special in those moments. And some of the craziest ones we've seen in League in the past were in China, where they went completely
yeah,
all out,
exactly.
which is why a lot of people have been disappointed, right? So who knows what went wrong at this time around and why we got this result. But hopefully, I mean, with Worlds coming up, hopefully the final in London is going to be absolutely crazy. For me, I'm going to bring a pretty extreme amount of jungle bias for this one, but
of course, it's the jungle podcast after all,
and it's not so much about the final specifically. I mean, sure, he locked in Lee Sin twice, he gets some bonus points for that, but I thought it was so cool to see Canyon like bring out some spicy and different picks this tournament. Like it started
Karthus
with
game 1.
Yeah, like he played Karthus.
Dude, Karthus is solo queue right now.
Yeah, it's
Karthus is cracked in solo queue, but this was before Karthus became OP with the new Blackfire Torch, right? So he played Karthus. He's played a lot in Italy. There was a Kha'Zix game. I think them recognizing the AP jungle angle to complement Chovy's skill set and Yone is also really awesome. So I think like just watching him pull out some of these champions that have always been terrorizing solo queue, but that nobody would be willing to play in jungle and pro because they're not traditionally seen as these strong team fighters, and proving people that you can make it work has been great. But again, like not everybody has the Yone, Chovy Yone next to them. But man, like Canyon is always so exciting to watch.
I think one of the biggest things I thought about while watching Gen.g in this tournament was, man, it's so nice seeing this team with Keen and Canyon instead of Doran and Peanut, who had a history of really not showing up at international events. Like, I swear every domestic split, I'd be watching LCK and I'd be like, oh my god, Peanut's playing so well again this split. Like, he's going to show up at this international event, surely. And then it goes international, it's like, oh man, Peanut just, like, the cheese didn't work, he didn't show up. It just is what it is. And then you have Canyon, who paired with Chovy, just have these two individuals that are so good at the game at amassing econ, and then how, like, to exert that on the map, and you pair them together, and you are able to crack open champions like a Karthus, like an Italy or a Kha'Zix, where you have a mid laner that can play well enough as an individual where they're going to be winning at the parts where they should in their matchup, and even more so because of how talented they are. And then you have junglers that, like, once you ramp up as an Italy Karthus, I mean, you clear so fast in that Karthus game, it felt like it was close, and then Gen.g won one fight, and Karthus was too big, and it was over. Or the Italy game, like, Canyon, he had winning lanes, he can just dictate the entire map, and then the game is just over. Even when he didn't dictate the entire map, thinking back to what the game 5 they had against BLG the first time around, no? The game, yeah. Yeah, so... I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think... I mean, I also think it's worth pointing out that Canyon's playstyle has changed a lot, especially after joining Gen.g, because obviously if you have so many skilled individual players, like, often you're going to want somebody to take a more supportive role, and naturally the jungler is going to be a big part of that. But whenever, like, he gets these opportunities to play aggressive and bring back his old Damwon style, beautiful.
Yep. I mean, to an extent, like, it is the MSI final, so it was absolutely a treat. And of course, like, there are maybe we wanted to go to 5 games or whatever, but I think at the end of the day, this MSI, it's been very competitive, and not just, I want to say, from the side of EU. I think as well, like, PSG Talent and what they were able to do is also another showcasing of. It feels like, to an extent, maybe the gap is closing a little bit when it comes to this international stage. Maybe I just, like, saw one good game from G2 and I'm, like, absolutely overdosed on that hopium, and I am, like, losing my mind. But I would like your input, Broxah, in terms of whether you think that gap is closing, or obviously it would be a more of a slower kind of approach, or was it more teams were maybe not in tip-top form from the start of the day, from the start of the tournament, and that has allowed some of these teams to sneak a couple of wins past here and there?
I think it's a combination of things. Like, I think Team Liquid and G2 in particular leveled up massively this tournament compared to what we saw from them in LCS and LEC. I also think the top teams outside of BLG had a bunch of games here and there where they did not look that convincing. Like, BLG had a rough series versus PSG. T1, a lot of people have questioned. Like, if you exclude Gen.g from the conversation, like, it's actually been a lot closer between the West and the East than you would think, right? And I think part of it, one thing that's been, a big part of why it's been so exciting to watch as a Western fan, or like a fan of any region, has been the change of format. Because imagine if we didn't have this format with a loser bracket. Like, literally every Western team would have been knocked out instantly in the first round. Like Team Liquid would get 3-0'd, Fnatic would get 3-0'd, and G2 would just lose to T1, and then it would be over. Like, and we would be sitting here crying with the same storylines we've had for the last 4 or 5 years where everything was a disaster. But because the loser bracket existed and they were able to bounce back and prove themselves, like, it's an entirely different storyline. So I think the format change has been huge for many reasons, but also for the West, it's given us more time to adapt and to develop and to learn from the mistakes that were happening in the previous series. And those key learnings, I think, was part of why the gap wasn't as big as we've gotten used to. We also got really lucky with the format. Just a quick note that MSI actually finished without a single same region series taking place. Like, that's also kind of crazy. So I don't know. I just
honestly,
love this format.
I was kind of bummed about that. Like, I'm okay with inter-region matchups, especially like in like the later stages of the bracket. I think it just worked out the way it did. I've also seen a lot of discussion about people being like, "Oh, this is the best tournament we've ever seen Riot put together. Like, this is the best League tournament ever." I disagree with that. I think that people just realized like how important double elimination formats are.
Yeah, that's
like,
what it comes down to.
Yeah, it literally was just a fact that it was double them. I think of all the good lower bracket matchups we had with big stakes. I mean, I think that the fact that it took so long for Riot to put this in is kind of a bummer. And thank God we got the tournament we did and the fan response we did, because it ain't changing now. It's going to be double them moving forward, and we're probably going to get more of it, which is great.
Fuck yeah. I
really wish we had it earlier. Like,
yes,
you know, I'm always
it's a crime.
Sitting. No, but I'm always going to be sitting with a huge what if from Worlds 2019, because we made it to quarters with Fnatic. We played FPX, and we got completely destroyed in quarters. I mean, it was a 3-1, but everybody for weeks said that we were terrible and it was disgusting how we let Europe down and whatnot, until G2 faced FPX in the final and got instant 3-0'd, and it was over. And I was just like, wow, like, these guys were so insanely good, like, but they were also really underrated the entire tournament. And it felt like we never got to see how good we actually were compared to all these other teams. Like, we just faced the raid boss immediately and we were gone. And I think it's been the same for so many tournaments we've had, where if you were unlucky with your seeding, it was just game over immediately, and you never really found out how good you were. And that really sucks, because I think being left with that feeling so consistently is also part of why every team in the West always brute forces for roster changes after every Worlds. Like, G2 now decided to commit to this approach. Team Liquid has made some changes, but generally stuck with the same concept going into the year as well. But everybody makes so many changes instead of just building on the foundation you've already created.
Yeah.
Welcome to esports. Like, that's it unfortunately is the case, and it's not just the case in League of Legends. It's the case in Valorant and CS and Siege and in Dota and every single game that you look at, and it's just, I guess, part of the curse, or I don't know. People want returns very quickly when it comes to this industry, and it's completely understandable. It isn't a newer quote unquote industry, and investment at this point in time isn't there.
But my point was, like, imagine if we had no loser bracket this tournament, and you come
we're done.
from this MSI as T2 or Team Liquid or Fnatic, like, they probably would make roster changes going into Summer Split realistically. Like, there would be changes made, but now, because most of these teams actually got to show something, you feel like there's hope, you feel like there's something to work with, and the entire storyline is so different.
I don't know about that. Because then you're looking at, we talked about Sam's tweet last week, particularly on the podcast, in terms of like the tweet that he made, like, oh, we know there are issues and there will be changes. So to me, when it comes to the LEC, that says that there are going to be changes, at least from the side of Fnatic, when it comes to Summer Split. I mean, G2, I love their approach, and I think it's incredible. Look how far it's gotten them. They have been so competitive in this MSI, sticking with that same roster. They're obviously not going to be making changes, but yes, we've seen glimpses and we've seen hope, but we have seen it from the teams that have fundamentally, like you mentioned it, Team Liquid and G2, who have stuck to those players. We haven't seen it from the teams that have been going around and making changes. And Fnatic is one of the teams that, yes, made it to international, has made changes, is now looking to make changes too. So coming into LEC for summer 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if we see something change up just because of the tweet that was put out.
So I think having these loser brackets in more series is both good and bad, because you get the good side of the story with Team Liquid and G2 looking legitimately good versus the Eastern teams, but you also see teams like FlyQuest and Fnatic just completely mental booming and, just getting nuked. I personally was extremely excited for the Team Liquid Fnatic series. I expected it to be a lot closer than it was, but Fnatic just got completely and utterly destroyed. And it's tricky, right? Like, if you're FlyQuest or if you're Fnatic, you are the second best team in your region. You made it to MSI. You already have built a lot of good things that you can continue to work on. So it's like, I think it really comes down to where the problems lie and how easy these problems are to fix, because usually when you're on a team, there's a lot of band-aids that you put throughout the year to try to increase your chances of doing well. The worrying part for me is, Fnatic is a question mark, I think, because I think Fnatic just has to hire some insane mental coach to fix the team's mental issues. Specifically Noah, who's actually been pretty open about the fact that he's been struggling mentally, dealing with stress and pressure, not sleeping well and whatnot. He even put up a post on Twitter about it. I think FlyQuest for me is a trickier one. I would be very surprised if they don't make changes.
It's already reported that they did make changes. So.
Oh, well, there we go.
Let's head into this then. I would like to I think I would like to start off with the LEC, if that's okay. And we start off in terms of like the roster changes, what we're expecting from Summer Split. And then I would also really like to talk about the LCS. In that part, I think we've already touched upon the LEC a little bit last week, particularly. We know Giant.X has made changes. We know KC has made changes. We're expecting, I guess, personally, Fnatic to make changes from the tweet that came out from Sam. Vitality has made changes as well with their jungler. It feels like it's the same old LEC, just again, new faces every single time.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. I think, I'm curious how much things are actually gonna change in the LEC, because there's some changes, but it's like the one team that I feel like I've said this every split like this year, but the one team I'm really curious about is like Carmen Corp, like whether they can actually go really big and these changes make a massive difference for them. But outside of that, I think there's a limit to how the other changes will actually impact the team's performances, because some of these teams have issues that seem so big that just changing one player is not going to do anything. It like to me from the outside, it more looks like, hey, like at least we can tell the higher ups in the organization that we made some change and that we're actually trying to turn things around. But like let's say Excel or Giant.X, sorry, no longer has
Excel who?
Ramne. Yeah, like they no longer have Ramne. Like, what's the point of benching him? Like, you got to be kidding me. Like, sure, the guy didn't look amazing individually so far, but I still think he's a fantastic player, and his leadership skills can make a really big difference for Giant.X in the year. So I don't know. I think Carmen Corp exploded their roster, and they kind of have to, which makes them really exciting. But it feels like many other organizations, or some other organizations at least, just did changes out of desperation rather than actually having a clear logical plan.
So then when it comes to like predictions in terms of how these changes are going to be playing out, are we expecting similar rankings in terms of where the teams were and then where they will be? Because Vitality making a change in their jungle particularly, and we've been made aware this is a jungler that both Matt and Pat have been looking forward to incorporating in their roster for a very long time. So they have a lot of high hopes. And Vitality always, usually, well, the coaches, Matt and Pat, played that long-term game, the game of scaling throughout the year. Is this change for at least this team gonna put them on that second spot rather than always a bridesmaid? Well, you're never gonna be the first spot. You're never gonna be the actual bride because there's G2 there, but the second slot.
I think that like this change for me was kind of weird, and I will trust Vitality because I think their coaches over like the years have actually earned it in terms of the players they take in and performance. But correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Tagawas like
You're wrong.
third team All Pro? Oh, thanks, Jenny.
No, I'm joking.
Wasn't he third team All Pro in the voting, or like I thought he had a pretty decent split in the summer. And
He did.
the issue with Vitality, they need a voice of sanity. Like, is that going to be a new rookie jungler that's coming in? Because this team for me is the team where they just play like with their heads or their weight way over their skates, and eventually they're going to play the game too fast. Where like against the best teams, it will fall apart, regardless of if they're able to get early leads or not, which they're talented enough to do. I think that I don't know if having a rookie jungler is going to solve that, and if he does, then props to him and props to the coaches for figuring this out, because that's a crazy diagnosis. But I don't see it on paper, like how you are able to connect, like fit what this team already wants to do, but also be the person in that team that actually says no to some things. Because I really feel like that would help Vitality in quite a few points of their games.
Yeah.
Well, you don't like the dragging teams down in the mud and just like going into fist fights and using your feet as well and no rules involved. Like everything's off the table. Are you not entertained?
I mean, I am. Don't get me wrong, I am. That's my morning over here in NA. I just get to wake up, have a coffee, and just watch an absolute like mud bath. It's great. But
It's a shit show, but in the best way.
yeah,
It's an EU shit show, you know.
yeah.
It's interesting though, because I mean, from the outside, Douglas definitely did end up looking like one of the best junglers in the LEC here by the end of spring. So it's confusing that they decided to make a change in that role. But I also think if you are to brute force a player change, it's the only role where you could actually make any adjustments, because I mean, there's some Huli haters out there that wants Huli Sang replaced, but Photon looked like one of the best top laners, Kazi one of the best AD carriers. I think Vicio has always been a really solid and stable mid laner.
Yeah.
And then you have the support that's been one of the greatest European supports of all times, but that has some high highs and low lows. And you have the rookie jungler who's looked pretty solid, but who most likely, because he's still pretty new, isn't the greatest shot caller. Like you said, you need somebody who can be more of a big voice within the team and make sure that things don't get too crazy. So I think them deciding to make a change in that role is not necessarily a bad thing, but bringing in Lunkers instead of, well, I probably pronounced that name horribly wrong, by the way, I'm so sorry, but instead of somebody with more experience, like, I don't know, a Syncroft, perhaps, maybe even a freaking Selfmade. I'm not looking to return. Holy moly, can you imagine the Hulu Broxah return? That would be really high back.
That would be hilarious, but also you'd get clapped by like 16-year-olds.
No, but I feel like you bring in another unknown quantity instead of bringing in a Syncroft or a Selfmade or whatever. I have no idea if any of the two would fit into the team, but at least then you know 100% what you're getting, and hopefully that could bring some form of stability and leadership to the team, which could make a pretty big difference in the long run. So, I don't know, maybe it's going to work. I highly doubt they're going to be top 2, but maybe they're going to, prove me wrong.
I mean, they have K-Corp to worry about now, you know?
Oh, yeah. No, I wanted to come onto that, and I wanted to say, like, can we like do like a tier list? I know we don't have the tier list thing open, and it's not done, but let's look at the orgs in the LEC who have made roster changes and then put them in tier list. S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier, going to shits tier. That's the bottom one. So I mean, S tier, from all the teams that have made roster changes, who would you put in there?
I do want to say respect to K-Corp, who now their fans have decided to protest the LEC, and they're joining their team in solidarity for the first 2 splits. When now their team might actually be competitive, but the fans, they only want to see that not the rest of the league. So, yeah. that's fun. I think K-Corp, like, this team is like so weird to me. I know I teased it like earlier on. I'm really tempted or like really interested to see if Baddaje actually said no to this roster. Because on paper, that's the one that makes sense. You know, it's like, oh, we're bringing in closer, and now we have Baddaje on the secondary team. Like, that's quite interesting. I know that they promoted Vladdy, but the fact that you're bringing in closer in the same offseason, like, that's kind of weird to me. I think that K Corp, they need the bottom line is they need a ridiculous summer to make it to the championship, because they have bot-2'd the first 2 splits of LEC. Did they make changes that I feel like can actually fix that? I'll be honest, I don't think so. I think this team will probably top 5 at best.
But that is like technically an S tier change, because you're going from bottom of the barrel dog shit to like middle of the pack. That's an S tier.
I mean, by K Corp standards, I mean, it doesn't matter. I can guarantee that if they don't, make Worlds, it's going to be a disappointing Kometo. So,
but it's so weird, right? Because, like, nothing against any of the players, but I highly doubt they're going to be able to turn it around with this lineup, generally speaking. But then they got Kana in top lane, and I'm like, this guy just doesn't fit into the team at all in any way. Like, a team with this guy, I would expect to, have a very high chance of winning the league. He's gonna be coming in and dunking most LEC top laners right off the bat. But yeah, Closer hasn't played at all this entire year and didn't look that impressive in 2023. Upset and Targamas haven't been the most impressive bot lane, and I'm not exactly convinced about their synergy in the 2v2. Vladdy is a complete question mark. Even their coaching staff, I don't freaking know what to expect from them. So it's just been, I don't know, it's just kind of a shit show over there. But hey, again, like, if you now have a lineup that's not destined to go instant 10th, then yeah, I guess that's an S tier change, right? Like, honestly, I think most of the changes that we know of, I'm not super convinced that any of them are going to be like
I'm not
huge or like game changing. Like I already said, it just feels like a lot of it is middle of the pack or lower tier teams trying to fumble in the dark to make a desperate change to get back on track. And I'm also going to be honest, like I'm a little bit biased about all this, because I've always disliked changes, like, fundamentally, mostly because I feel like often when organizations in esports and league make changes, it's in the very moments where the team has the opportunity to grow the very most, like after a really difficult split or after Worlds or whatever, where you have so much that you can learn from. But instead of just sticking together, trusting each other, and fighting the good fight to get back on track, you just make a change and then it's a complete reset button. Because that's essentially the case. Like, every time you change a single person on the team, the entire playstyle is different. And I don't know, I feel like you need a really, really good reason to go down that route, or it needs to be really doomed. Which was the case for Carmen Corp. You could argue it for other teams, like for Giant X or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. I'm curious to see what Fnatic is going to do, whether they're going to make any S or F tier changes, or any changes.
It wasn't F tier, it was dog shit.
Fair.
Just say the word dog shit, Broxah. You can say it.
No, I'm a good boy. I don't do that.
He does not swear. He never swears. Like, literally, his team is inting him in solo queue. They are literally running it down. They are spamming FF. It's 15 minutes in the game. It's the first game of the new season. Broxah goes, well, I'm just really disappointed that we're losing this way, because, like, we could have won. Me and Poppy are really trying. I was like, I would be flaming the shit out of my team. I respect that. I respect that. You have a really good mental. I don't know how you did it this many years in League, but
it's funny. Like, whenever I stream, like, if I say any swear words, no matter which one it is, the moment I swear, the entire chat is just like, Monka is like, he's about to unleash. Like, it's really rough right now. I'm like,
years of pent up aggression and anger coming in.
One day he's just gonna, like, explode. It's gonna be on the LEC analyst desk, and it's gonna be because I pushed too many buttons. But speaking about,
if Fnatic continues losing to G2, I might. We'll see.
Ooh, okay. Well, I'll keep that in mind. I'll really stir the pot. LEC splits. We talked about that. We're gonna know that Brock is gonna have a mental breakdown on the desk at some point when Fnatic loses to G2 again. He's gonna have tears running down his face. He's gonna be screaming, crying, throwing up on the floor, rolling around. But then we have the LCS and FlyQuest, as you mentioned, Cubby. They have announced that they're gonna be making some changes. In your analytical brain, what are you thinking about the changes? Do you think they're necessary? Like, I know they haven't approached MSI the same way that Liquid did when it comes to that discipline, when it comes to like, oh, we're gonna like go full 120%. But are these changes necessary?
From everything I've heard, I'm gonna go with yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
So I think it's a unique situation where, I mean, FlyQuest didn't have the performance they wanted to in MSI, and it looks like the team kind of boomed. And I was really frustrated at this team because they didn't play as a team when they lost to PSG, and then they went out in interviews and gave lame answers. I think swapping mid, it's something where I really feel like Jensen fit the team in the sense that Bwipo will take the resources, bot lane's probably going to need something. Let's just throw someone mid and it will be chill. Like that can just not lose games. And that's Jensen's bread and butter. I mean, that's where he's made all of his money here in NA. I think that when MSI came around, I saw Jensen play in MSI, and I think that he actually lost FlyQuest some games. I was like, this might sound weird to teams, but I thought his TP usage was quite poor at MSI. I saw a lot of TPs where it's like, okay, well, you're just griefing tempo, or like, I still remember one game against PSG. He TP'd in, used Tayla wall. They got nothing, and then he walked bot, and then they lost the next fight because he has no tools to join. It's a 5v4. I think that when Jensen was at his best, it's when he was playing off and through Bwipo. As I thought that Bwipo and Jensen actually complemented each other really well with finding picks in side lanes. And those were good TPs. Outside of that, it was kind of weird. Jensen's champ pool was an issue this split. We're playing Annie a lot as FlyQuest. I don't think that Annie has its own viability as a champion and was actually somewhat slept on, especially when Ahri was being blinded, but we're still playing a pretty limited champ in Annie. And even when that happened in LCS finals, we couldn't execute on Annie. Like we're dying to Tayla under turrets. That's poor. I think that Quad fits the way that Inspired wants to play the game a lot better. Like everything that you hear about Inspired is he will just glaze JoJo like there's absolutely no tomorrow. And the reason why is because JoJo was able to create his own leads and play aggressive and be up. Quad, covering Challengers League, he was one of, if not the best players in that league. He was dominant in lane. And the thing about that FlyQuest Challengers team is that their two solo laners were Surdy, who has gotten a lot of hype in NA and should be in LCS, and Quad. And a lot of those games, one of those solo laners would just win the game for them in the first 5 minutes. I know that's a lower level of competition in LCS, but Quad had the highest CS differential out of any mid in any league in spring. I think that that really speaks to how dominant he was in his role. Out of the 10 mids that we had in Challengers League, only 3 of them were up in XP at 10. That's crazy. That's actually a ridiculous stat for how top heavy mid was in this NACL. So a lot of this was because of how good Quad was as an individual. I think the biggest issue with Quad, going back to his LCK days when he was playing under the IGN Solka as well as Quad later on, was that the rumors were he had stage fright. And I think the Quad honestly was trying to make too many plays. Like he was more dominant in the first half of Challengers League than the second half. And I really feel like it's because he was trying to be unleashed. Like he realized he was better than everyone else. He was going for everything and seeing what he could get away with. And that to me is a player that doesn't have stage fright. My concern is that maybe that's a little bit too much in the LCS stage. I don't think that will be the case. I think that Quad's going to find solo leads and help Inspired either play through mid to win games or play through Inspired to win games. Something that Jensen and Inspired really were never able to do. And for that reason, I think it was a necessary change because it's either like you change out, you keep Jensen, or you promote like one of the best players in the league below who has played LCK level and keep the rest. So I think that FlyQuest actually made the right solution here. And I think it's going to be an upgrade for them overall.
I think considering the circumstances, it could definitely be the right move for them. I also think like the very moment Inspired went out and flamed Jensen publicly in an interview, like I don't care what anyone says, the moment you do that to a teammate,
Yeah.
It's bad.
something
That was really
is so
bad.
incredibly wrong within your team that you have to make a change one way or the other. Like there's no way it can be avoided. Like you can call it banter as much as you want, but you just don't flame your team publicly. You just don't. So they had to make a change. But I also think it's worth pointing out that the only one who, in my opinion, can be happy with the way they played at MSI on that entire team, even if we involve their coaches with drafts and whatnot, like the only one who lived up to expectations or even exceeded them was Masu.
Yes.
The AD carry Masu was great. Like he was fantastic, much better than I expected and most people expected. He had a great tournament, big highlight. But Buibo didn't live up to expectations. Like he got a lot of resources from everybody on the team, and he would often end up throwing them in the mid game. I don't think Inspired was enough of a team player, and he played a little bit too selfish generally. I think like that's one thing that's very different jungling in like international tournaments compared to within our respective regions, that you have to turn it into more of a supportive role. Like you have to set your carries up for success. You need the synergy. Inspired and Jensen was never able to build that synergy like you mentioned, and I think that hurt them pretty heavily. So I don't know. I think it was just a shame the way that FlyQuest lost. It's like I don't mind the way G2 and Team Liquid dropped out of MSI because they showed a lot of good things. I think even Fnatic showed some stuff here and there, although it was still a disappointing moment to seeing them lose to Team Liquid and the way they lost. But for FlyQuest, complete disaster. Just a disaster.
Do you think then with this changes, if you have to make a prediction in terms of the top teams in LCS, would it remain Liquid and FlyQuest Cubby? Do you think that there is going to be another team that can test that top spot?
I mean, the real big question in NA is, does C9 contest? Because that's the expectation, right? And C9 didn't meet the expectation in spring, and they made changes, and that'll be interesting as well. I still have FlyQuest going to Worlds.
What about C9 Yellow?
C9 Yellow?
Yeah, Dignitas, from what I've heard and read online, they are basically becoming C9 2.0. They're like going to be the Heretics. Like Heretics...
G3.
What Heretics is to G2, they're going to be to C9, right? Like, we have Licorice, we have Sven, we have Isles, maybe, I don't freaking know, maybe Jensen is going to be joining them. Like, they're literally just all former C9 players, right? I'm pretty excited if that team actually happens.
You're on Reddit too much. This is what happens.
I mean, I respect that. I still don't think that they're going to make it. I'm going to be honest. I think there's like too many questions. I think that the biggest thing for C9 Yellow / Dignitas is, let's face it, that organization has been losing, and they have been losers the entire time in LCS. They have not been winners since Someday and Aftermoo played for that team, and even then, they were still losers.
That's a throwback.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I think the biggest gift for Dignitas is the fact that they have Sven in the building. Because I can tell you for sure, that guy is not a loser. That guy is a winner. And if you are a loser, he will not put up with any of your shit. And he's going to turn things around. So I think that any faith I have for Dignitas, I do not care what form they're in to start off. I just have faith that Zen will turn that team into winners. I think just like where Licorice is at in terms of his play, I don't know. Sven at least has streamed a lot of his games and has had like Korean solo queue boot camps. I have a much better idea of where Sven might fit on the totem pole in terms of NA ADs. Whereas Licorice, I'm not sure. I think that he took a little bit more of a break than Sven did. I know that he was just kind of like the LCS substitute top laner behind the scenes in scrims. Like if your top laner wasn't feeling well, Licorice would play. It must have kept him in some form, but the big question is, will he be the best top laner in LCS, which he was the last time we saw him? I don't know if that's going to be the case or not. And I think a lot of Dignitas' chances will actually rest on that, along with Speak Up, which was announced today, that XU tweeted that with 4 days before scrims have started, after being reassured that he would be on the team the entire time, he is not anymore, and Speak Up has been reported to be in.
Yikes.
Disgusting.
Brother, ew.
Yeah. So
That's actually such a sad esports classic if I've ever seen one. Like,
That's
Yeah.
so messed up.
Bakery decided to get some fresh new toys in the kitchen, you know. So
New toys in the kit. What?
I don't know.
Toys are not allowed in the kitchen because like children shouldn't be in the kitchen because then you can have accidents. Or you can have fuck ups like this where people find out 4 days before scrim starts that, oh, that's messed up.
This certainly wasn't in the cards. Like I had
No?
personally never heard that Spica could ever be an opportunity for this mysterious C9 Yellow organization throughout the entire offseason. It definitely was never ever rumored before. And LS definitely didn't tweet that he heard about this rumor 2 weeks ago. Where it definitely wasn't ever an opportunity before just now today. So yeah.
it's one of these things that's so tricky, right? Because for all this off-season stuff, like up until a certain point, you're not actually allowed to like commit contractually. So for so long, you just have a vocal agreement where you kind of pray that whoever you have the agreement with is not going to screw you over. But if they do screw you over in cases like this, you're actually doomed because you find out so late that you can no longer join any other teams. And
Yes.
That sounds
is a brutal situation to
terrible.
be in, especially because some players will be very lucky, like having a contract that secures them with some form of salary for at least a certain amount of time afterwards, but some are just going to be left with no job, no income, no nothing. Presumably he's going to not have a home either and will have to hopefully move back to his parents or whatever, but it's just such a huge life change in every single aspect. And I don't know, I just can't believe this still happens.
It's disgusting. In the big age of 2024, people still. I think in general, like that's the thing with esports. At the end of the day, it's like it's a passion industry, and to an extent, that will be used against people. But that's a whole different conversation for a whole different day. Because you know what we are going to talk about? We're going to talk about Karthus Jungle. Because a new patch for AP junglers is so fucking great. I love it. You know what's really nice? To just not have a jungler at all, or in your team or in the enemy team. I don't really give a shit. I played like 4 games this time around. They were all with the Karthus Jungle. Holy shit, that thing's busted. What happened? Why are you laughing? God, I'm traumatized. I got traumatized in 4 games. That's it. That's all it took. I like switched off, logged off, and I haven't been back for a week. I cannot do it. Sorry.
What did you play in those 4 games? Did you play Vayne?
What's an app
No.
in Zaya?
No?
No, I didn't play. I don't even remember what I played. Don't look up my
Then
account,
I can't
please.
use my Vayne joke. That's unfortunate.
No,
I'll save
you
it for
can't
the
do. You
future.
can't drop my IGN because I get paid.
I mean,
I'm
it's
gonna
not
drop it.
your Twitter.
I'm literally Medic 2.0.
No, you can't say
Anyways.
my in-game name.
No.
It's not that bad.
Like I said, I'm a good boy. I'm too innocent
can.
for that. Now
no,
everybody's
actually, say
gonna
my
search
in-game
it.
name. No, now. Yeah, what's my
boy.
in-game name, Broxah?
No, I actually know it. That's the worst part. But now you ruined my thoughts.
No thoughts in this head, just in-game names.
You should try Zaya in some Karthus. You just trade our
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
No, I had the
Actually,
Karthus on
true.
my team. That thing did nothing for like 20 minutes and then randomly presses R and everybody on the enemy team, pentakill!
Yeah, pretty much.
What the fuck?
Yeah. The new dot item, like even if it didn't have the amp against monsters, the new dot item would still like potentially be best in class. But it has damage amp against monsters. So if you're Lilia, Brand, Morgana, Karthus, you are in
Lilia.
the happiest spot you've been in a long time.
Ooh,
in
where
League of
does
Legends.
that put Elise? Because she's also an AP jungler, and we have not seen her in a
It's
hot
still half a
minute.
champion, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is, like, we essentially now have this Blackfire Torch, a burn item, that pairs really well with something like Leandry. So champions like Karthus, Tayla, Lilia, also something like Brand that just deals a lot of damage over time in these extended fights are just impossible to deal with now because they literally just burn and nuke your entire health bar with you having very limited counterplay. Like, I try to keep an updated jungle tier list. I had to move Karthus, Tayla, and Lilia into like the top of S tier randomly just because of this patch. It's just crazy. But certain champions like Elise, sadly, is still very reliant on bursting and one-shotting somebody. Not to say that, these type of changes doesn't benefit her, and I think most AP junglers just naturally have seen an increase in win rate after the patch, but some certainly benefit.
Oh boy, they have.
I also think, Ginny, you and AD carry main, it's the time of AD carries. I've even seen a couple of pro AD carries going out saying that AD carry is now broken and Infinity Edge needs to be nerfed because it's ridiculously strong. And
no, it doesn't.
These crit changes were too crazy and too far. Like, what do you think?
I think? I played literally 4 games on AD carry.
Broken AD carry rule?
Challenged in game. That's all that I got going. That's all that I got going on. No, I played I think 4 games so far with the new items on AD carry before I came out to the event. And yeah, Infinity Edge is kind of busted. Can they just not fix it? Yeah, I mean, I know Draven and Samira got hotfixed because they were actually nasty, and I think nasty Samira is not even
crazy.
It was not legal. That shit should not have been on the server to begin with. But I'm really sad that it gets nerfed after I get back, so then I don't get to play with the busted items. I'm not saying that I need it for the elo boost, but I do kind of need it for the elo boost.
Yeah.
What about you, Cubby? What do you actually play?
I'm a fill player. I peak support. I hit GM playing support, but I
not bad.
When I played in college, I had to play 4 roles, so I've played a little bit of everything at some point in time.
Wow. Out of the changes, which role do you like the most?
I mean, in terms of changes, I actually have some beef with the AD changes, so I will start with the beef.
Okay.
I think one of the big issues historically in League of Legends is that if you didn't base with 1,300 gold, you'd be down a BF sword. And with the changes they made to the items, and with IE being such an attractive early item for some champions that I think are B1able now, like Caitlyn, you're once again back in this situation where you have to find a way to base with 1,300 gold bot. So the game just revolves around bot lane to see who can base with 1,300 gold, or if you can stop the enemy team from doing so. And I really think that Noonquiver actually did a really, really good job of fixing a very inherent problem historically in League of Legends, and now it's been reverted. And I know that Jack Spectra tweeted about this. I very much agree with his diagnosis of AD is now I have to find a way to base and buy a BF sword, and if I don't, I will probably lose the game. Or bot lane is just over. And so I'm actually really hoping that they tune down IE to make sure that it is not an attractive first item, the way it is on some champions like Caitlyn right now, who is also the most abusable champion at stopping you from getting 1,300 gold and also trying to lane until she gets 1,300 gold herself. So I think that IE is a massive problem in the game. I know it's getting nerfed, but I preferred it when it was Noonquiver first. I think that it actually fixed a very inherent problem in the League by having your first item have components instead of just needing 1,300 gold.
Well, you said you start with the beef, so now you have to go on to the happy part. Now you have to lift up our spirits and make us excited for this new patch. I know it's hard, it's League, but you got to do it.
AP jungle's fun. I actually appreciate that for top lane that they gave ability haste for the Sunfire items, but honestly, I haven't really experimented too much with the patch. I've been ignoring League now that MSI is wrapped up, and when I do play, I just kind of chill in D4, so it's not a great level. I have a team I'm helping out with right now behind the scenes, it's tier 3. So I'm pretty much asking players, I'm hey, what do you want me to test? And they're play this and see what's up. Brand Nami's quite fun right now in bot lane. I can say that.
Oh, sure. No, stop.
Yeah, the dot item with Brand Nami. Yes. Oh, it's so fun, Ginny. You want some free Evo? Play some Brand Nami.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll play the Brand. I don't really know how to play Nami that well. She's so squishy.
She just has to EU, and then you murder everyone.
Yeah. Broxah's just nodding. He's yeah, Brand Nami sounds fun. You want that in your bot lane?
You know,
that's actually really easily gankable, to be fair.
No, but Cubby was talking about picks to test, and I was yeah, I actually should play some more Morgana jungle soon. That'll be fun.
Yes.
If you had to,
a lot of things in the meta, actually.
If either one of you had to give people that are listening one champion to test in one role, what would it be?
First pick
Morgana
Caitlyn.
jungle. Oh, Caitlyn Morgana. That's actually a good
Yes.
combo. Morgana.
No,
is a
that's
combo.
nasty.
Well,
That's a good combo.
High key.
just do Q.
No, high
Who wants
key.
to do
Like,
a Q?
the best drafts we've come up with so far in this patch, in this like, so the team is like master tier like GM. We've been it's first pick Kate, and then it's Flex Morg for jungle or support.
But you know what's
They-
even greater about Morgana? Morgana
really fun.
counters Lilia, who is an S tier champion. So
Yeah,
it's
Lilia's.
2-1. Win-win.
Ooh, you can put Morgana.
also
Could you put
play
Morgana mid? Is that still a thing?
Like,
Like she doesn't
Please
bring
no.
much.
I don't want Morgana mid in my team. That's
She brings like
champ.
I was
nothing.
about to say a
Champions.
Dodge, but
unfortunately, Morgana's like half a champion still, but it's fine. Have we gotten any Corki games in?
No.
No. What about
Uh,
set jungle, Broxah? I think the meta is shit for set jungle, so I'll take that back.
yeah, not entirely convinced.
Lane Viego.
Lane Viego is pretty interesting. I think especially like top lane Viego has some potential in certain bruiser matchups now that they buffed his healing a lot.
I gotta try it actually.
Oh, Skarner. I know the Skarner rework. Everyone's really excited. Why is this guy dog shit?
That well, no, the champ
Wait.
was actually global banned in in-house servers in NA, deservedly so. And then I don't know about this patch. They pretty much made it so that you don't do a bajillion damage while you're a tank.
Yeah, but the bajillion damage while being a tank was fun.
No, it was
To watch.
FPS.
He's definitely
was not
not
fun to
dog
be a
shit.
part of.
Like he's one of the highest win rate junglers in the game. He's really high win rate top lane as well. They've tried to make some changes to make him less obnoxious and give him counterplay, but it's like he's still disgusting. I still ban him pretty often.
Then why, when you were playing him, were you like, oh wait?
You need to stop tuning into my stream at very unfortunate times, I guess, because I played them like 3 times in the 2 other games I was smurfing.
I don't
Actually,
know
I
about
just made that up completely.
Corki.
Like, I just pulled that out of my ass, but okay. Like, I'm
I
glad
had
to know
one
that.
game. I had one
Yeah.
game where I completely sprinted it. It is true, but I think that goes for most of us. And then we learn, well, maybe I shouldn't be first timing this champion in a solo queue game.
Oh, that sounds like a really
Yeah.
good idea.
And
Yeah.
Yeah, but at least then you get the in out of the way one way or the other, I guess.
Wise words to end today's episode with. Don't first try. You wanna say
we're ending
something?
just like that. I thought we were,
I thought we were
cook
ending
more.
on a wise note. We're gonna. What
Don't,
do
you want? Don't you want Ewo? We can keep on cooking.
What do we want to cook?
I don't know.
What?
You tell me. You got to give some of your takes now. What do you got?
What are my takes? I have no
Yeah,
takes.
I don't know.
I'm
You
just
tell me. What do you
I'm
want
just a
following?
dumb host.
What do you want to see? No,
I read the comment sections. I see what people say. I see
no,
you
okay.
guys.
We
I
do
just
read
have
those for community
pictures
questions,
in my
of course.
head of like Cubby just cooking crazy strategies all night and
Yeah, I was just like, can see him
I'm
like.
gonna be so lost when he appears on the Discord server next time, you know.
Cassie at top. It's doable. Dot items OP.
I've actually seen that. And like,
Yeah.
it works. It works.
Yeah.
So I'll go with
Fimbulwinter
that.
also OP now. Build Fimbulwinter.
Can we bring back like Arden
cooking?
supports?
No.
You
Like, I don't.
Absolutely.
I just don't like it when I get left
I
alone.
think this is where we
in
end
lane.
it. Like, get me out.
No, wait. Like, keep us in. No, I don't like
is
it when I get
disgusting
abandoned in
take?
lane.
But, you know, the first Worlds I ever played, 2017, the meta was Arden meta. Like, the team
Yep.
that won the game was
Yeah.
the team who supported Arden first.
Yep.
It was so sad. It was sad.
But then they are by your side. They don't leave you. They don't abandon you. You don't have to be all by yourself getting play safe under tower and then
I think you would hate laning with me as support. Like, you would never see me the entire game.
I would play a game with you as
Get
support
level 3 walk mid.
if you tell
Yeah,
people
exactly.
right
Just
now
leave
my
you and
in-game
carry.
name. If you tell people my in-game name, I'll play a game with you.
No. I refuse.
No, what you say, Brox, is I don't have an account that low. We're not able to play a game together.
No, he said he refused to say.
Opportunity.
Don't give this man ideas. He's not.
I don't know
He's. You know, he's slowly becoming more toxic in person. I feel like online it's still, you know, except when he spams Kek L. I taught him what
working
Kek
on
L
that.
meant. This man did not know what Kek L meant, and he goes, "Haha! Now I'm going to use it against you."
If you want to see the podcast continue to corrupt Broxah, please like and subscribe before you head out for this episode, you know. We're
Thanks,
going to try
guys.
our best to make this man swear
I'm
over
just going
time.
to be a
Yeah.
completely maniac in like 2 months from now.
I think 2 months is like generous. Give it like 2 episodes. This guy's gonna lose his shit. Either way, thank you guys so much for tuning in for today. We will end it here before it goes even further into madness. We're gonna be back again on not next week, but the week after that. So make sure that you keep it in your diary, because I'm sure you don't really have any social activities to take part of, and you're probably running it down a solo queue anyway. So this would be a good break.
Oh.
Take care of yourselves. I was talking to myself. Take care of yourselves, guys, and we'll see you then. Bye.